Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's Family Matters. Today, we're joined by Jodi Lyons. And Jodi, thank you so much for taking the time to participate in our interview today.
Well, thanks so much, Lynn. It's great to be here.
Welcome. So, Jodi, before we get started on today's topic, would you mind introducing yourself to our families? Tell them a little bit about you and what you do.
Sure, and please forgive the sirens in the background. I guess that's the life of always a geriatric care manager. So I am an elder care expert, and you should think of me as the tour guide on the tour that nobody wants to be on. So my company is carebrains.com. And what I do is, well, for those of us of a certain age, will remember the AAA triptychs,
Oh,
where you used to have a map and it would be broken down into segments, and you would know that if you were driving on a highway, here are the things to expect: the road construction, where the bathrooms are, where the fast food is. That's what I do at CareBrains for people with dementia and other older adults to help them find the care they need throughout the country.
I love your
And
analogy.
thank you, thank you. And the other thing is, I'm a very proud co author of Brain Health as You Age with Dr. Mansbach and Dr. Steve Simmons.
Awesome. So it sounds like, you spend a lot of time supporting older adults and their families. So, Jodi, let me ask you this. When you notice as a family member that you have a loved one who's maybe starting to need a little more supervision, maybe some
Mhm.
extra hands-on assistance, other support, what do family members do at the beginning to try to determine next steps? I know a lot of families will oftentimes just try to do everything themselves, right? They start off thinking they can kind of fill in the gaps, but then
Yeah.
they start to notice that maybe they can't handle this. And then maybe they're considering getting a professional caregiver to come out to the home, or maybe they're considering placing their loved ones somewhere in the community. Are
Mhm.
there assessments or initial steps people need to take to help them determine what are the needs of my loved one and where do I go from here?
Well, that is a great question. One of the things people talk about is the old frog in boiling water analogy, which was if you take a frog and you have it jump into a pot of boiling water, it jumps out because it knows it's being burned. If you put a frog in water and just keep raising the temperature, it doesn't recognize the danger it's in. That's the same thing with caregivers. And so ideally, I would get a caregiver to call me before they start trying to take on projects and fill in the gaps and trying to do, we call them the DIYers. So before you try to do something without knowing the plan, please call us. We do have a full assessment on CareBrains, and our process is to go through the medical, legal, financial, cultural, social expectations of the family to see what they need, what they can afford, what's culturally and socially appropriate. And we also do some basic screening for cognitive ability. Now, our algorithm and our screening process also then triggers a, I'm going to be very blunt, it gives us a big warning sign and it says this person's going to need additional screening. And when that happens, we actually send them all to Enrich Visits, which is your website, enrichvisits.com, for a virtual visit that will give us much more detail about the actual aspects of the cognitive impairment. To be completely honest, most of my clients can outsmart the mini mental status exam, and it doesn't help us. So, in order to find appropriate care for somebody, we need to know if they have cognitive impairment, what kind of cognitive impairment, what stage of cognitive impairment, so we can plan ahead for the future. So, it's a lot of screening and questions to find out what's appropriate. And the other thing is, we really wish people would stop going to Google and just Googling assisted living. because that's a marketing term. And sometimes you need to know, most of the time, you need to know exactly what services you need and who's offering it, not just a marketing word.
That makes total sense. And it sounds like your initial meeting with each individual family is fairly comprehensive, getting a
Yes.
really nice overview of what their abilities are, what their strengths are, and maybe what might be some opportunities to help support them.
Yes,
So,
absolutely.
as families are participating in this kind of assessment, it sounds like having a really honest discussion after you kind of have gathered all of this information, talking about what's realistic for your loved one right now, what you might need to
Mhm.
anticipate or plan for moving forward, is really sort of part of the model. I liked how you said try to be more proactive and reach out
Yes.
before you're in sort of emergency mode. How can you help families sort of set realistic expectations and help them find that just right level of support, whether it's a caregiver or, like you mentioned, maybe some type of community placement? There's a lot of resources out there. How do they determine what do they need right today, and then maybe what they're going to need 6 months or a year from now?
I'm so glad you asked that question. Our goal is to make a plan with statements such as, when this happens, this is what you do. I look at it this way: when you have a kid and the kid is going off to kindergarten, the school system usually has the family members come in and they say, here's the process. There's going to be a school bus. Here's your school bus driver. Here's the kid's kindergarten teacher. And they walk you through the whole process so you know what to expect. And then when it's junior high and the kids are switching classes and teachers for the first time, they take the kids and the parents through and they say, here's what you can expect. So it's not a surprise when the bell rings and it's second period. But the most appropriate parallel to this is when a kid goes off to college. Most colleges have a big ceremony and they welcome all the parents in, and then they throw the parents out and they say, go away. We have this. Your kid's going to be fine. Here's the process. Here's the team. Now you need to leave and let us do our jobs. What we try to do with, usually it's the adult children trying to take care of their parent, or in the cases of the younger onset diseases like Lewy body dementia or frontal temporal dementia or young onset, it's a young spouse. And what we try to do is teach the caregiver what is likely to happen down the road, what decisions they're going to need to make, what resources are available to them. And then when the expected happens, they know how to deal with it. And we also try to teach them what to do if something's unexpected outside of the norm, because there are a lot of resources, but people don't know what they're looking for. And everybody says they can do memory care, and not all memory care is created equal, and not all aides are created equal, and not all home care agencies are created equal. And you also really don't want to bankrupt the surviving spouse, and you don't want to have the adult children jeopardize their own retirement or their own health. So it's important to vet the resources and teach people what to expect so they can make an educated decision. There was an old store, it's probably decades old at this point, in New England. It was called Sims Clothing, and their tagline was, an educated consumer is our best customer. That actually is very applicable to here.
That makes sense. And I can understand how making sure your family members are well versed in all of the different options, all
Mhm.
of the different resources will only help to strengthen the plan. The more they understand the expectation and what they may need to do and when,
Yes.
the better and smoother the plan will go. So,
Yes.
okay, let's talk about two different kinds of scenarios, both folks
Okay.
that stay in the home and that folks that might look for a placement. So
Hmm.
for folks that are staying in the home setting, and I know sometimes that's the preference to begin with,
Sure.
try to keep mom or dad at home. There are local resources out there, but I think sometimes families really struggle to find even the basics. Like they're trying to do their own grocery shopping at their home, then mom and
Yes.
dad's grocery shopping. They're picking up their own medications and they're trying to schedule mom and dad's medication pickups and
Hmm.
pharmacy orders and getting them to appointments, trying to take time off of work and beg, borrow, and steal from neighbors and other family members
Yes.
to kind of pitch in. So it can be really chaotic for them. Are there any examples of services that you've used in the past or recommended to families who are in that home setting that can help to support sort of that model?
Yes. So I will say staying at home, and I always get a lot of flack for this, but I'm going to say it again. Do not let anybody into your home unless they are licensed, bonded, insured, and federally background checked.
Great.
Just
That's a great,
because they may
great
have helped
advice.
out your neighbor does not mean it's okay to let them in your house. You want to make sure you are covered if they fall. You want to make sure that your family member is safe, all sorts of situations like that. So, what I always say is you want to find a home healthcare agency that offers both the skilled care, physical, occupational, and speech therapy, and private duty care to help with bathing, dressing, toileting, transferring, eating, errands, light housekeeping, etc. And then that agency is going to help coordinate all of the aspects of living. And then use the grocery delivery services and the mail order pharmacies. It is absolutely simple to go online and order your own groceries to be delivered and mom's groceries to be delivered to her house. And the pharmacy is going to deliver both. And you simply tell the aide when you're having the groceries delivered and let them put it away. You do not need to be running to grocery stores. And as everybody else knows, there's nothing you can't get online.
Especially since COVID, right? Things really
Mhm.
transitioned to online services and lots of
Yes.
organizations now offer that. So that's a really great tip.
Well, and the other thing is that for appointments to medical appointments, many of the home care agencies will send an aide with your parent to the doctor's office to take notes.
That would be
You can
wonderful.
use any of the ride share programs. You can set up the ride share. You can use a taxi service. You can use the home care agency. You don't need to go to every appointment unless you want to. And finally, there's all the restaurant delivery services. They can deliver to your family members too, not just to us when we're tired.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Some supplemental things in between the grocery shopping or the
Hmm.
family visit just to kind of keep some variety in their menu. Yeah, I love
Yes,
that.
exactly.
So some people are lucky enough to be able to stay in their home, make that work with all of the resources you just mentioned. Conversely, sometimes families feel placing their loved one in some type of residential setting, whether it's an independent living or an assisted living, or even a
Hmm.
skilled nursing facility where there's other levels of care might be a better option. And that can be
Hmm.
really confusing because there are so many choices available. And if people don't really understand the differences in the levels of care, it's really hard to make an educated decision, as you were mentioning. If you were to advise a family member who's trying to gather some information, maybe they're trying to make a
Hmm.
list of possible locations to consider, what would be some of the things they should start to really look at when they're making their, list, their short list of facilities maybe that they want to
Right.
tour or where they want to take their loved one to see it in person?
Well, again, great question. I'll reframe it a little bit, which is people always ask me, when is the right time to start looking for these things? The answer is yesterday. The most important thing to recognize is that people wait far too long for their loved one to move into a residential community. It's really vital that you move them when they still have the ability to make new memories. So the parallel I use is when you go to a hotel room after one of those really long airplane flights and your luggage is lost and you're just completely exhausted. And the bellhop said, here's a tour of the room, here's the mini fridge, here's the bathroom, etc. And you go to sleep and you wake up in the middle of the night because you have to go to the bathroom. In the back of your mind, you stand a fighting chance of remembering that the bathroom is to your left, not to your right, like it is at home. And while you may trip over your shoes, you stand a fighting chance of finding the bathroom and getting there safely. So, when somebody has cognitive impairment, you want to make sure that they have not progressed to the level that they can't make new memories. You want them to be able to have a fighting chance to remember the new routine and settle into it. Remember where the dining room is with prompting. And so, one of the things that's hardest for me is when somebody says, well, mom still knows who I am, so I'm not moving her. By the time she doesn't remember who you are, it's very often too late for her to settle in easily into the new community. So, number one, start looking yesterday. Number two, make sure that you are prepared to make the move while your loved one still has the ability to make new memories. And number three, when people are going to tour the communities, they all have the same reaction. My mother's not like that. What I always say is look for the sickest person in the community, see how well they're being treated, and then as your mother or father progresses or spouse progresses down the road of dementia, that when they get to an extreme point like that person you're seeing and you're afraid of, how are they being treated and how will your family member be safe? The other thing is, not all dementias are created equal. They have different profiles, different life expectancies, different behaviors, and not every facility or home care agency can handle each particular dementia. You've got to match up the provider with the disease and then have that correspond to financing. Can the family afford it without bankrupting themselves? Is it socially and culturally appropriate? Because again, we know, particularly after COVID, that social isolation really, really hurts people with cognitive impairment.
Oh,
And the levels
absolutely.
of depression and anxiety are tremendous. So, going back to if you're staying at home, where's the social stimulation coming from? If you're moving to a community, is it the appropriate cultural and social feel even for your loved one? Are they going to be comfortable there? And then, and only then, after you've gone through medical, financial, cultural, and social, only then do you look at geography. Your loved one's living there 24/7. Family members, even if they're going by every day, are spending what, maybe an hour? There's still 23 hours a day the loved one needs to be. Geography is the last step. So
That's
sorry for the long answer.
No, I really appreciate the comprehensiveness of your answer. It really helps people to sort of organize priorities, what's most important, the type of care, like you mentioned, the social interaction. Sometimes the food is a deal breaker, right? All of those things.
Absolutely.
What types of levels of care that are available? I know some
Yes.
facilities have a campus where you can start in one level of care and you
Mhm.
don't necessarily have to leave the community. You may just move to a different level of care if you have more comprehensive needs. So I think those
Yes,
are all
yes.
really great suggestions and kind of easy things to put on a checklist when you're meeting
Mhm.
and talking with folks. I think the other big takeaway that you mentioned is don't wait so long to explore that option where the loved one maybe can't even participate in the
Right.
choice or the decision. Have them be an active part of the team when making these choices.
Yes.
You mentioned a lot of different things to think about, both financial, cultural, social. I wanted to touch a little bit on sort of the legal document aspect. I know families
Yes.
oftentimes trying to
Thank
prepare,
you for asking. Yep.
scrambling to get paperwork in order. They may know that they need a will in place, but are there other things that should be prepared, in advance or in case of emergency, so families have all the documentation at their fingertips if they need it?
I am so glad you asked that question. One of my personal pet peeves is when people very proudly say, I have a will. And I say, that's great, because that happens when you're dead and it deals with stuff. I'm more concerned about you, the human being, and taking care of you while you're alive. So let's not worry about the will right now. Number one, you need power of attorney documents, both for financials, very often called a durable power of attorney. That's your money and stuff. Who's going to help make those decisions? And then a medical power of attorney, sometimes called a healthcare proxy, which allows somebody to make decisions about you. You have to have, let me rephrase that again. You absolutely positively must have a durable power of attorney and a healthcare power of attorney in effect now. Everybody should have it now. If you get hit by a car, if you are cognitively unable to make your own decisions, if you caught COVID and you were unconscious and on a ventilator, who's going to make those decisions for you? Who's going to sign contracts on your behalf to get you home health care or sign in for the assisted living? Who's going to pay the electric bill at the house? Don't just add your kid's name to a bank account. You need power of attorney documents. Absolutely, positively. And please do not go buy them off the internet. Go to an attorney. They should be part of any regular estate plan, which is where is the money? And it should be a team effort with your financial advisor and your attorney. If you don't have one, people like me help you find your attorney and financial advisor. So you have a whole team. So you have your medical team, your legal team, your financial team. And then if anything happens to you, you can be taken care of. And again, it's not disposition of stuff. It's where are you going to be and how are you going to live? On top of that, there are two other documents. One is the legal document called the Advance Directive, also very often called a living will. That goes from attorney to hospital administrator. That is, what are your wishes? When do you want to be on a ventilator? When do you not? Here's a catch. Doctors do not follow legal orders. Doctors follow medical orders. So in many states, there is a document called a POLST, or a MOLST, medical orders for life-sustaining treatment, physician's orders for life-sustaining treatment. There's an organization called the POST organization that will help you get the documents. It is very, very specific. So it starts with a do not resuscitate, do resuscitate, do not intubate, do intubate. But then it goes through, do you want antibiotics? Do you want a blood transfusion? You fill it out with a doctor or another medical practitioner, and that goes in your file so that the EMTs, for example, know that you are not to be resuscitated or that you are to be resuscitated, but you don't want any artificial hydration or nutrition. That should correspond with your advance directive, but one's for doctors and one's for lawyers.
It's a lot to think about, and it's really
Mhm.
smart to be making these decisions when you have the luxury of time, right? Where you can kind of
Yes.
think things through and talk to your family and make one decision at a time, get each thing in place. I can see how doing this before there's an emergency versus during an
Yes.
emergency would be a lot less stressful for both the older adult or the family member and those adult children who are trying to help support you.
Well, exactly. And the other thing is, please, if you are making somebody your power of attorney, tell them. I've actually had cases where somebody was made power of attorney, they didn't know and they didn't want to do it. and the person was already being sent to the hospital and we had nobody else to sign anything.
Yeah.
So conversations, conversations, and conversations. There are people to facilitate these conversations because they're hard.
Yeah, it is. It's a lot to think about. It's a lot of
Yeah.
information. I mean, you really have to be comprehensive in the way that you plan for, both your
Hmm.
medical as well as, like you mentioned, your financial, your legal, your physical health conditions and issues. There's a
Yes.
lot to really think about. I know we're almost out of time and we've covered a lot of information, which is great. Jodi, are there any websites or resources, organizations out there that are, easy to access for folks out there who are looking to start on this journey of finding caregiver support, educating themselves, just
Hmm.
starting to understand what all of these considerations really are?
Absolutely. So you can go to my website, which is www.carebrains.com. We are doing our best to answer questions that we see online. We also have, questions to ask you so you can start thinking about things. We are also on Facebook. So we have a website, carebrains.com. I'm on Twitter at Jodi Lyons 1, and we are just starting an Instagram at Carebrains. So you could find us on social media. And again, you can find us on our website at carebrains.com.
That's great. Thank you so much. And to all our families out there listening today, I hope this information really helps you to get organized and to start thinking about your planning for the future, as well as managing any events that are happening right now in your life and partnering with your family members and getting a team together. It sounds like the big message of the day is it takes a village, right? And
Absolutely.
you need some professional help and guidance to get started on the journey and to really assemble a team to help you be successful.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Lynn. I appreciate your having me.
Thank you for all of the information, and we really appreciate your time today. And thanks to all the families who joined us for today's Family Matters. Have a great day. Bye-bye.